So our last little thing today is going to be a panel discussion, and I've had the opportunity to work with all of these panelists to varying degrees over the years, and I can tell you, if you want to be changing the way things are done in this space in Florida, these are three individuals that you will want to work with. As they come up, Nancy McKee is Associate Vice Chancellor of Innovation and Online Education at the Florida Board of Governors. She serves as staff to the Board of Governors Innovation and Online Committee and is responsible for strategically planning, directing, and coordinating initiatives related to online education and innovative approaches to higher education. Elijah Scott is the Executive Director for Florida better known in the state as FALSI. It's based in Tallahassee in the office of the Florida Virtual Campus. Prior to joining FALSI in 2016, Elijah was the Dean for Libraries, Colleges, Testing, and Curriculum Innovation at Georgia Highlands College. John Opper is the Executive Director for Distance Learning and Student Support Services for the Florida Virtual Campus. Dr. Opper oversees the operation of student support services offered through the Florida Virtual Campus. He interacts regularly with state policymakers, education leaders, community agencies, educational entities, and industry technology, education, and participates in creating statewide distance learning policy programs at colleges and universities. So let's welcome our panelists.
I agree with Ethan. This has been an amazing 2 days, and I want to thank the Florida Virtual Campus for pulling everyone together, and I want to thank our speakers for sharing your initiatives, your lessons learned, your recommendations with us, and we want to take full advantage of that as we continue moving forward in the state university system. We have initiatives in several of our universities related to OER, but we also have conversations going on at the system level. You have the attention of both the Board of Governors and the legislature, and the governor as well. The legislature has included a performance metric on cost of education, and we've defined that metric in terms of the cost to the student. One of the elements in that calculation is the cost of textbooks. So we know that it's on the radar screen of the governor and the legislature. In terms of the Board of Governors, we have a strategic plan for online education that the Board of Governors adopted in November 2015. OER and the cost of educational materials is included in that strategic plan. I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes explaining the development of that plan so that you can see the buy-in that we have of the entire system. When the Board of Governors directed us to develop a strategic plan, they wanted a task force put together that was made up primarily of presidents and provosts. We also had faculty and students represented on that task force. We had one of the presidents from the college system on there as well, and we had a distance learning leader. So that group is the one that actually put the strategic plan together. They included goals, strategies, and 49 very specific tactics that would have deliverables for us to make sure that that plan was not just going to sit on a shelf somewhere, that we were actually going to implement it. So right from the start, we had the buy-in of the leadership in the system for that plan. The day that that plan was adopted, the board directed us to start implementing it. So we put together an implementation committee that has representatives from every institution in the system. To help guide that effort, we have a steering committee that is a subset of provost and a representative from the Chancellor's office, which that representative. But that group helps vet the proposals that are coming from the work groups. Now, we have established a bunch of work groups, and I know that a lot of you in the audience are on those work groups. When you think in terms of implementing this plan, 49 tactics is a lot to address. So we created not only work groups and gave them specific charges on which tactics that they were to address, but we found that several of those work groups needed to create sub-work groups because they needed experts in particular areas to focus on. I help coordinate that at the system level. I work very closely with the chair of the implementation committee, which is Dr. Cindy DeLuca from the University of South Florida, and the chairs of the other work groups. In November, when I gave an update to the Board of Governors, all of the work groups did a tally, and we found that there were over 100 people in the system that were serving on these various work groups. Those groups had met for over 120 times at that point. So we have a lot of time, a lot of effort that's being devoted to these tactics. We also have on just about every work group, we have representatives from the Florida college system, and they have been invaluable to us in helping us move forward with our plan. Most of the things that we're working on are things that will benefit their system as well, and so we have found that it really serves us well to work in tandem with the institutions in that system. We do have a goal and strategy and two tactics that are specifically focused on OER. And you can read those on the screen. We have that the SUS will reduce the cost of educational materials for students. The strategy is developing a statewide model for the use of e-textbooks and OER to reduce costs for students. And then we have two very specific tactics. And they're focused primarily on increasing the use of OER materials and on reducing the cost to students. These particular tactics fell under the umbrella of our online programs work group. And so that work group then created a sub-work group to focus on OER. The initial phase was chaired by Jennifer Smith from the University of Florida. And I know that Jennifer is yes, thank you, Jennifer. A few months ago, and I need to go off on a tangent to explain the next sentence here about University of South Florida having the lead for this. We found that we had so many initiatives underway that several institutions stepped up and said, I'll take the lead on this issue, I'll take the lead on that issue. And so we have 5 or 6 institutions now that are taking the lead. They are working in concert with other institutions in our system and most of them with the institutions in the Florida college system. So for OER, University of South Florida stepped up and said that they would take the lead to help on a system-wide basis that initiative. So the work group is currently being co-chaired by Jennifer Smith and by Monica Metz-Wiseman. And Monica, yes, over on the side of the room, and Dennis Walpole, too. I know that Monica is getting ready to retire soon. I think it was, 13 days, 4 hours, and 16 minutes, maybe? And so when she retires, Dennis and Jennifer will be co-chairing that group. So far, that group, one thing I do want to mention. Until this point, that work group has consisted of representatives from the state university system. We are going to extend the invitation to institutions in the Florida college system to participate in that work group and help us think through and go forward with implementing the recommendations. You can see on the screen that we do have several initiatives at particular institutions underway. So this work group so far has been in a fact-finding mode. They're looking at initiatives that are already in the system. They're looking at what other states are doing. They're looking at what the existing repositories are, the catalog tools. It's strictly been in a fact-finding mode. Now, when this group puts together a proposal, they will take it to the steering committee, which is a subset of provosts. They'll be vetting it with that steering committee. When the steering committee approves it, then it will go forward to the Board of Governors for approval. Currently, we're looking at updating the steering committee in June. If the group has a plan put together by then, that would be great. We don't know at this point. We may end up moving the date a little bit, but tentatively, we have the steering committee reviewing it in June and then taking it forward to the Board of Governors in September. If there isn't a hard plan in place, what we may do is to have a workshop for the Board of Governors so that we can start educating them on what's currently going on, being able to share with them where we are so far, get their feedback for how they might want to see things as it moves forward. But we do have plans within the next several months to move forward with this. We also had a legislative budget request that we included for the 18-19 budget. Now, we had to submit that request to the legislature prior to having the plan fully developed because we were hoping to get money to help us move forward. The legislature, as you know, is currently in session. At this point, the initiatives for innovation in online have not been funded in either the House or the Senate budgets. So it's looking kind of slim that, even though miracles do happen, we don't count on them. So, it looks like that we're not going to get the additional funding this year. So one of the things that the work group is going to be doing is kind of readjusting what the initial plan was. And instead of counting on getting money to help us move forward, they're going to be thinking through how can we move forward without getting additional funds for it. So it's a little bit different perspective than counting on the money. I also wanted to mention to you some of the other tactics in the strategic plan that are related to this OER conversation. One of our goals is to enhance shared services to support program development and delivery costs, with the strategy being developing a common tool set for online course design and delivery to minimize the cost of online education, with the specific tactic being develop or co-develop shared master courses that would be available but not required for use in specific high-demand areas. Now, this is an initiative that University of Florida is taking the lead on, and the Board of Governors has approved their proposal. The plan is to focus initially on these master courses being in the gen ed area. As the tactic says, they would not be required, but the concept is that we would have a repository that would include one instance of a gen ed course that would go through a quality review process. That course, or any component of that course, would then be available to any faculty to be able to use that. So we're at the beginning stages of that. We haven't determined exactly where that repository, what it's going to look like, but we do have a focused plan for it anyway as we go forward. Another one is a presentation that we had at the Board of Governors in January that they approved. For the past year, we have been looking at STEM labs for online students within the state university system. And we found that we already have 92 such labs in our system. But so far, they've been developed by individual faculty based on their interest and their expertise. There hasn't been a coordinated plan for developing STEM labs. And there was an interest by this task force, and especially focusing on biology, chemistry, and physics. So the recommendation that they made and that the steering committee and ultimately the Board of Governors approved is that the task force would continue over the next year. They would convene faculty for a 2-day conference, and I think that's being planned for this fall. And a critical piece of that is that they're going to launch a system-wide 3-year pilot for a chemistry lab. Now, the steering committee came up with a funding plan for it. The University of Florida volunteered to fund the faculty member for the next 3 years, with the other participating institutions funding the related cost of doing this. At the end of the pilot period, and faculty from throughout these participating institutions would also be engaged in helping to develop and design the lab, so that at the end of the pilot period, that lab would be available for other institutions to be able to adapt and use at their own campuses. And at that point, they will have been engaged in the whole process, and so we think that the faculty will be very receptive to it. We also have specific tactics related to professional development, and this was one of the areas that we heard several times from presenters yesterday in terms of how important the professional development piece is. So we have tactics related to the instructional designers, the professional, the institutional leaders, and having an online toolkit and annual workshop for professional development staff. Now that's the staff on the campuses that do the professional development for faculty. So they're using like the train-the-trainer approach. The college system has been actively engaged in developing these networks too, but certainly we have the structure in place that I think that we could take advantage of in promoting the OER initiatives. We also have a research consortium that has been created as a part of our strategic plan. We heard yesterday that research is an important component of OER, that we need to track what we're doing and the impact of what we're doing. So it seemed that we should tap into the expertise of the research consortium. We have researchers at every university represented on this consortium. Now, at this point, we have the consortium formed, and that's as far as we've gotten with it. I mean, we're still very much in the formative aspect of this. But, George, we've got a consortium that we can take advantage of now. So that's in a nutshell what's going on at the system level for the Board of Governors. And John, I don't know if you wanted me to take questions or if you wanted to wait until the end and just wait till the end? Okay, thank you.
Staying all the way to the end as we've all stood in front of the open fire hydrant that is OER for yesterday and today. Sean's going to get me fired up over here with his PowerPoint presentation. Tom, could I ask you to extend your right hand and pick up that large book next to you and bring that up to me? I apologize, I forgot that, and I'm going to need that. It's always good to have help from your friends. So again, I'm Elijah Scott. I'm currently the Executive Director of the Florida Academic Library Services Cooperative. A position that I've held for just over a year, but prior to that, my experience has been in college and university libraries for over 20 years. I am a librarian by trade and by practice, and I will always think of myself as such, and I take great pride in that. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we can approach this conversation from the library perspective. So having worked in libraries for a lot of years, I've mainly done reference and instruction. That means that I've been on the front lines having those conversations with students who have said things like, my instructor told me to print out this 150 slide PowerPoint presentation, but I spent all my money on gas to get to college. How can I do that? Or the student who said to me, I need you to help me find a book. My stepfather stole my student loan money and I can't buy any of my textbooks. That happens. Now, from the library perspective, I always approach everything that I do from kind of this mindset. And I don't know if many of you are familiar with Shelby Foote, the American novelist and author, but I live by this. If I could get this on a bumper sticker, I would. And this is kind of how I think of this. So in the context of this conversation, if you think about the library for a moment at your campus, the library is probably the one organization, the one body on that campus that interacts with everybody else and does so with neutrality. The library should be like Switzerland. We like everybody, everybody likes us, and we just like to help out, okay? So from that context, then, the library really has a valuable role to play in textbook affordability and OER. But this is something that in some ways is a little new to us. Let's think about this for a second. The library is there for what reason? So I'm up here on the stage and I can't hear anything, but I hear whispers, so I know you're thinking about it. But really, if you think about all the things that we have in that library, it's all there for what? Student success. We don't have those collections just to say, look at the pretty books on the shelf. We don't have those massive collections of journals, of magazines, newspapers. We don't bring in 3D printers, scanners, laser cutters, all the other technology that we have just for our own amusement. It's all there for student success and affordability. Because if you think about it, when an instructor says to a student, I want you to go find 10 journal articles on turtles and write a paper, if you didn't have a library, and if the student had to go out on the open web and find those 10 journal articles at $35 or more per journal article, well, that just probably wouldn't work. Okay? So that's how we meet affordability with those collections. But the most important piece, how many of us in here are librarians? Raise your hand, please. Thank you all very much, my people. You all are the most important piece. Where else on the planet can you walk up to somebody and say, I need some help about anything? And not only will they provide you with that help, they do so with a friendly face and tremendous knowledge and expertise and experience. The library is the only place on the planet, I would argue, that can happen. And our students need that. So let's think about libraries and textbooks. Now, when I entered my first professional library job a few years ago, one of the first projects that I had was to go out to the stacks and pull off 15 copies of an education textbook from 1956. And I said to somebody in the library, why do we have 15 copies of an education textbook from 1956? And I was told, well, the library used to purchase all the textbooks, and students would come to the library and check them out to use them for their classes. But we don't do that anymore because over the years the budgets have been cut. We can't afford to buy the textbooks. We have to focus our collections on books that support classes. Okay, great. So because of that, many libraries today have policies that explicitly say we don't buy textbooks. We have to be very careful in how we spend our budget dollars, so we do not buy textbooks. Instead, we have an option whereby teaching faculty can bring to us a copy of their textbook, and we'll put that on reserve so students can come into the library and make use of that. And that's great, but it's also limited because really only one student at a time can use it. If they want to make copies of that information to take with them, we're going to make them pay for that. There's some other limitations as well. So we kind of don't think of ourselves as being in the textbook business. And I was one of those people, I will admit, when I kind of entered this conversation about textbook affordability and OER about 5 years ago, my first thought really was kind of, well, the bookstore's over there, and we're the library. We don't do textbooks. Why are we talking about this? Well, clearly, I'm standing in front of you because I'm a convert and have completely changed my mindset about that. So let me talk to you first of all about some ways that we can use existing resources that we have in our libraries to support textbook affordability and OER. So on the screen is an example of this at one of the institutions that I used to work at. A few years ago, one of our faculty members came into the library and she said, I'm about to teach a new course in short fiction. I cannot find a single text that has all of the stories that I want to teach. I'm going to have to ask these students to buy 3 different books. They're only going to use small portions of each of those books, and it's going to cost them a total of about $150. And this was at an access institution in rural northwest Georgia, where at the time we knew that 64% of our students had a family income level below the federal poverty line. And we're asking them to spend $150 on this, right? So she came to the library and she said, can you help me out with this? The librarian sat down with her. It turned out that we already had every single one of those stories in our databases, in our resources, unlimited user access. So the librarian simply built out a LibGuide that linked the students out to each one of those stories in the different databases. It's in the order that the stories are covered on the syllabus. It couldn't possibly be easier. It cost the student nothing. They did not have to spend $150 on a textbook. It reinforced the value of the thousands of dollars that we already spent on those electronic resources. Over time, the librarian, actually, I went back to her LibGuide a few days ago and made a snapshot of it. She's actually added some things to that. She's added some of the free resources that are available on the open web, combined with those resources from the databases. And then, of course, more information about where students can go to get help. It's all right there. That's kind of low-hanging fruit. We can do that kind of thing all day long. Within FALTC, we spend about $7 million a year on these electronic resources. Bob Hartnett, Bob, are you in the room? I don't see a hand. Bob is our marketing and PR guy. He is awesome. And he said to me a few months ago, so tell me, I'm trying to come up with this OER infographic that you have on your tables here. And Bob says, tell me how many journal articles you all provide access to. And so I paused for a minute and I channeled my inner Carl Sagan and I said, billions and billions. And of course the number's not that high, but it's pretty high, covering all areas of the curriculum. So if you can work directly with the faculty member and get a copy of that syllabus and really look at it, we can do this kind of thing for many, many classes. That I call low-hanging fruit. Let's go a little further. So, new opportunities for libraries. Again, my mindset a few years ago was we don't do textbooks. That's not what we do in libraries. But in working with the Affordable Learning Georgia initiative starting in 2013, my mindset changed on that and started really taking a hard look at the community college where I was working at the time on the issue of textbook affordability. So let me set the scene for you. We knew every semester when we did our analysis at the end of the semester of how we'd done that semester, at the end of every semester, the either number one or number two highest enrollment course was always anatomy and physiology. The number one or number two highest failure rate course, students who received a grade of D, F, or W, was always anatomy and physiology. So our highest enrollment course was our highest failure rate course. Also in the context of this conversation, anatomy and physiology is a gateway course for the nursing program, which is the flagship program at that college. That college exists in a rural part of Northwest Georgia. Again, 64% of our students had a family income below the federal poverty line. We know that healthcare is the largest employer in the region, so they're coming to college to change their life, to change the economic life of their family. The nursing program is the best pathway to do that. That's their highest likelihood of receiving employment that pays them well. And we're effectively saying to them, okay, we know when you want to do this, we're going to ask you to buy a textbook for this course that costs $405. So we're further saying to them, we know from the data, you can't afford this textbook. You're probably going to use student loan money to buy it. That means that you may not be able to actually obtain the textbook until a week or 2 weeks or more into the class. We know there's national data that shows that every day that goes by that you don't have the textbook for a class, your chance of success diminishes. But we're going to ask you to buy it anyway, and because you're going to use student loan money to pay for it, we're essentially asking you to pay interest on it for 30 years. And you know, I looked around the room and I thought, I'm in a room, I was in the Deans and Directors meeting, college deans, and I thought, I'm in the room with some of the smartest people I know, and this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. We've got to change this. So we talked about it, and this is where the library came in. So, all right, we had this policy that said the library doesn't buy textbooks. Well, I went back to the library, and I sent my acquisitions librarian an email and said, I would like for you to buy multiple copies of every single one of the available OpenStax textbooks. And she walked over to my office a little bit later and said, I got your email, but these are textbooks. I said, yes, I know that. And she said, but we don't We don't buy textbooks. Yes, I know that. She said, we have a policy. I said, yes, I know that. I said, I'm the dean. Buy the books. She said, okay. So we did. So we did exactly what Nicole described earlier. We had a cart. We had all those OpenStax textbooks on that cart. And every time I talked to a faculty member, which was very often there because it's a fairly small institution, I was pushing those books in front of them. I got the dean of the science department. I placed in his hot little hands a copy of this OpenStax textbook, and I said, I really want you and your faculty to take a look at this. They did. And they actually chose to adopt it. So in the fall of 2015, they adopted that. When we got to the fall of 2017, I sent my friend Greg Ford, the Dean of Sciences, an email a couple of weeks ago and said, Greg, how's that working out for you with that OpenStax textbook? So the failure rate, the DFW rate, you can see on the screen, we went from a failure rate of 61% in the fall of 2014 to a failure rate of 30% in the fall of 2017. And that was the only major change to the course. Same instructors, same content, changing the textbook. That shows you the power, not just in terms of dollars and cents, but in terms of student success that moving to OER can have. So, let me talk to you just a little bit about the Florida Academic Library Services Cooperative. Some of you may not be familiar with us. We're the library consortia for the 40 public colleges and universities across the state of Florida. We serve 1.3 million students, faculty, and staff at over 150 campus libraries. And we do some calculations every year, and we figure that through things like interlibrary loan, we've helped students avoid costs of over $4.6 million. And then through those resources that I mentioned a moment ago, we've helped students avoid costs of over $14 million. I think those figures are probably low, but they're pretty good. We know that our students check out more than 3 million library materials annually. So, occasionally you hear people say, why do you have the library or things on the internet? It's not, and those numbers prove it. And we know how many searches they do for library materials. 23 million searches of those electronic databases that we spend a lot of money on. That's where students are going anyway to do their research. Let's keep pointing them there also for replacements for those high-cost textbook materials. So in thinking of opportunities for Fault C, again, we're sort of centrally located among all the libraries. I talked about the notion of the library being the center of campus. Well, Fault C is sort of the center for all of those libraries in a lot of ways. We do have a statutory language that says that we will promote textbook affordability. We're working on that. One way that we can do that is through all of those e-resources that we provide, all of those databases, the e-books that we provide, and so forth. There's a product called Curriculum Builder that we've provided for many of the institutions, and we're working on spreading that out to all 40. This is a really neat product. It makes it really easy because, as you've heard in some of the other conversations, when you're talking to faculty about this, you need to make it as easy as possible. Curriculum Builder makes it really easy for faculty to go into those electronic resources, into those databases, identify resources for their class, and pull them right into the learning management system. Doesn't matter which system they're using, it makes it almost seamless. So that makes it easy. We're working on a membership, a consortial membership for the Open Textbook Network. I'll be talking to you, which we just heard about, and we know how that will benefit us across the entire consortium of all 40 institutions with those on-campus workshops, and we'll be sponsoring attendees at the OTN summer workshops. We've also created a committee on textbook affordability and OER that's made up of librarians from across the colleges and universities. I know that some of you are here. Those of you who are on the committee, please raise your hand. Wait, right on. Yeah. So these are people who are in the libraries, who are centrally located on their campuses, and who have an interest in and a commitment to textbook affordability and student success. We're working as a group to identify what's happening at all of our different campuses from the libraries for textbook affordability and OER, and find ways to bring all of that together into a coordinated effort. Another thing in looking forward that we want to do, we've talked about in some of these conversations over the past day and a half, how hard it may be for faculty to find OER, to find replacements for those high-cost commercial textbooks. So we've been talking internally about building out our own search and discovery tool that will make it easier for faculty to do that. It will look just like the library catalog interface that they use right now, so they'll be familiar with it, and it will make it easy for them to identify existing OER resources and bring them in for use in their own classes. And we think we've got some ways that we can build onto that functionality, doing things like taking the common course numbering that exists in Florida, building that into that search and discovery tool so you can say for a particular course number, I click on that course number, it shows me everything that's available for that specific class. I think that's going to work really well. So my question for you, and I'm sure you all have questions for us on the panel, but my question for you is, what other ways could we leverage the power of this consortium of FALSI to continue to support student success through textbook affordability and OER? And I'll leave that hanging out there as an open question, and I'll turn it over to John.
So we've had a day and a half of this, and as Elijah said, you've been drinking from a fire hose and probably have a lot of questions, a lot of ideas, and hopefully you'll run back to your campus and be successful in a couple of weeks, right? But this is now the chance. The question that we have is the one that Elijah just posed. What else can we do? What do you need that you don't have? What else could we do? If we did this meeting again, what would it look like? What kinds of things would you want to learn about? There has been a request to, can we set up a way for you all to communicate with each other? And we will look at that and see if there's a way to set up a forum so that you can do that. There has been a question about can we have another meeting? So I'm asking about that. But what else could we do? What else would you like us to do at this level? Or what are some issues that you have that weren't addressed over the last day and a half, I guess, that you want to talk about some more, you need some more information about, or any feedback that you'd like to give us that we can take as Nancy kind of works and shapes the conversations with her group. Elijah works on the library side, and we think about how we can help you further. This is the audience participation part. Sorry, you can't get out without working a little bit. So what else can we do? What would you like us to do? So I'm going to sit and we'll just listen and take notes. Yes.
Patty Martinez at First Campus. And I haven't heard much about it. It's just been maybe touched on a tiny little bit. What happens when students have access issues where they simply can't get resources? The student coordinator mentioned something about a student being kind of just doesn't have internet access at home. And I think that's fairly unlikely in most cases, but what about rural areas where you don't have a public library to use internet nearby, or they simply don't have any providers? So for people in the military who are deployed, just for security reasons or for connectivity issues, really can't use electronic resources at home.
I think that's a great question, and I don't have the answer to that, but I have some answers to that. So much to my surprise, when I moved to Crawfordville, Florida in the fall of 2016, I found that I could not get internet access to the house that I purchased, period. Okay, so didn't see that coming. And we do have internet there now, but all we can get is DSL, which is mediocre at best. So I think to answer the question, one way to look at it would be to think about some of the things that Nicole Finkbeiner talked about earlier. If the materials are things that can be downloaded to a device, maybe if the student has a laptop or a tablet or something like that, maybe they can do that in the library. You're in the library while they're on campus, and then it's portable. They can take it with them. One of the things that I talked about with administrators at the colleges that I've worked at over the years is typically the library is open the latest and the longest of any place on campus, and it typically has the most computers available to students. So help them leverage that technology to overcome that barrier. Again, I don't have the answer, but maybe that's one possible answer. Around.
I don't have an answer, but what my mind is thinking about is some type of electronic bookmobile, which essentially is no more books, but it's essentially an electronic access point that goes around in rural areas. But I don't know if that's
And some libraries check out Wi-Fi hotspots. Some libraries check out laptops and other devices like that. So that might be another option. Make the technology available to them.
Hi. Chancellor at Seminole State College. I have two thoughts. One was you mentioned creating a community, something that would benefit our institution would be having this more faculty focus to get their participation, increase their awareness, and get their buy-in, because that's where we're finding challenges is getting them on board. And then also perhaps see if there's a SGA state level counterpart. We can work with them as a larger organization, because again, from the perspective of our institution, we're happy to talk to students, but it's a local thing on campus, and so it would be potentially viewed as going over people's heads or forcing the issue on them, going around them. To work with students and students advocate on our.
A couple of people have suggested that we, if we have another meeting, to take it down from the 35,000 foot level and make it a little more work on something, and that might be some of you in the room, but it also might be faculty. And if that's so, the question to you would be, if we did that and we structured it that way, and we would ask for feedback from our experts and others, can you get faculty to go?
And I would also advocate the college system becoming more involved. We've heard a lot of advocacy from the university system, and we tend to tag on to those things, but I would like to see the college system be a little bit more on the forefront as well.
And I would say, just in fairness to them, we have been openly communicating regularly with the Chancellor and their staff. They have a convening in Tallahassee today with all of their presidents and a lot of things going on, and they could not break away. They were not very happy that they couldn't be here, but we will inform them of everything that we did. And of course, we taped a lot of presentations, so we're making sure that they're aware. They are interested in the issue very much so, but scheduling just didn't work out. The hurricanes got in the way in September, just meant everybody.
Before we go to the next question, just a quick add on what you said is really important. Right? You want to act, but there's political realities, and you don't want to be blunt to have your head cut off by somebody who might be above the infrastructure work with students, as an example. Right? That's real, and we should acknowledge that. And so one thing that as a part of my role is to push these guys a little bit. One thing that you all should hear from that is that the open education movement is both bottom up and it's top down. And what's really helpful in a top down kind of way is to have some very simple but clear policy statements. So I've worked with a lot of states and a lot of countries, and we do things like we look at their existing missions, their existing strategic plans, and oftentimes your strategic plans already say things like increase equity and inclusion, or reduce student costs and student debt, or reduce time to degree, or whatever it might be. And we know that when courses and degree programs move to OER, those needles on those key performance indicators get better. And so even if you don't, there's oftentimes not a need to write a new strategic plan. But it's really helpful to people like you who are ready to act if the president or the provost or the board of governors or somebody says, hey, we've got this strategic plan, and there's many ways that we're going to be implementing it. One of the ways that we're going to be implementing this is through open education initiatives. And so we are fully supportive of the shift to open textbooks. We're fully supportive of getting students involved in campaigns in working to educate faculty and institutions across the state of Florida to learn about OER and the benefits. It's important, to make some of these statements because faculty and librarians and instructional designers and student leaders will hear that message, and what you've given them is permission to act. And absent that permission, the fear, if I can be blunt, exists, and that's a real thing. So that's really important for you guys here.
We're going to ask visiting college. Just an observation. I was just producing a policy in the FLBC websites, and of course we're all relying on websites these days. It just occurred to me, there's been a lot of stuff that like refers to prior as being it would be great if there was a place on here where kind of information we can earn is concentrated that we can use in our own sites. We're a lot of time for us to do these presentations too. Great if there's a place where we can turn to material that we could reuse and also use to point people like our presidents and vice presidents in a direction where there's more detailed information.
I think we've talked about using the event website, building it out, reformulating and putting a lot of the material from this event up there so you can have a place to go and see it. So that's probably what we will do.
When you were talking about the strategic plan, there was a mention of wanting to make some master course material for basic classes, I'm guessing like UCL 101. Would that be housed in like a statewide LMS, or would that just be material that would be available for anyone to use?
We do envision it being housed somewhere, but that's one of those things that work group is still looking at to see where the most appropriate way to house it. At this point, the only decisions that have been made are the ones related to let's focus on gen ed. Yes, let's have a repository. So we're not that far along yet. Do you have a recommendation as to what may be workable?
Well, I don't know what would be best for everybody, but I would love to hear what about this decisions going forward. I'm the instructional designer at IRC, so there's like a work group, instructional designers, I'd love to hear from them.
I'm curious, just a raise of hands, because I'm going to assume that you all have talked to everybody. But by a raise of hands, how many, based upon your conversations with other people here, you have the feeling that you are duplicating effort that someone else is working on at the state? Just raise your hand. Some of it. And that's probably one of the things we don't want to do.
Connecting to Nicole's comment on direct versus indirect, it appears that, and believing in that, anything in the FLBC could do downward that would reinforce the direct connection between performance funding and OERs would be the thing that would create some interest in our campus. Far more than upward. Performance funding is something we talk about, but there's no direct things we can do. It's so intangible about how do we improve completion rates, this and that, like the lists people have provided about what we could do. If there was a downward communication in some manner through survey results, through something that would give us that connection, we could leverage that connection to get books to students and money saved, regardless of whether our institution makes more money or doesn't make more money in performance funding. That's the one thing that we could do to get faculty to perhaps help with that process.
Another defense in the McKee note that the last session was some changes to the funding formula that gave as a bump for the average textbook cost being lower, and so I got more calls from finance folks at the campus who were
trying to count all of a sudden the use of OER and trying to figure out how to handle the average lower cost of textbooks, because the lower the cost, the lower the average, the more performance funding you might get. Similar to that, a year or so ago, Jerry and I were in Louisiana talking to a group like this about OER, and we were using the textbook survey data, which you have the infographic for. And the conversation that we had then was about talking to faculty and saying, if your students aren't buying textbooks, or if the cost of commercial textbooks is shying away from purchasing the book, and if there is a direct relationship between that and their lack of performance in the class or completion, which is then extending time to degree, which means that your overall performance funding picture at the institution level is looking poor. You can improve that by having students complete and be successful. And so we've got here evidence that they're not being successful for various reasons, but obviously the cost of textbooks is an issue, and that's something that we can deal with. But it's a direct relationship between the level of performance funding and things like faculty raises and general travel budgets and things like that. So that was a long conversation in Louisiana, and something that resonated directly with faculty members when they started to see how that came home to roost directly on the budget.
I'm a math instructor at community college in the state of Florida, and my husband also teaches high school math in the state of Florida. And I'm wondering if we're having conversations and collaborations with the K-12 system, because some of the initiatives that are coming out of the K-12, the use of the Orange Grove, affirmation, and these kinds of things, they're really great initiatives. And they really address some of the questions and concerns we've already raised: lack of internet, lack of printing, print, these kinds of things with these kids. And I think if not only can we bridge the gap, so to speak, in the curriculum, but we can also be sharing a lot of wealth of resources coming out of UF and Florida State, some of these schools of education that are already in existence, especially with mobile devices.
Had some conversations with the K-12 folks, and they are investigating this as well. As you know, textbook adoption in K-12 is another kind of experience that we have in post-secondary education. But OER is spreading, and classroom teachers at the K-12 level are famous for pulling in free stuff because they don't have any money and they're always trying to do something. But I don't think they've got that organized either.
Another question, but 4 thoughts on philosophy compass. So the first one is, Elijah, if there's any way you can figure out how to help us come up with financial incentives for our faculty to either adopt or create open access materials. We have submitted a student technology fee to do this, and our students said, we should do this on our own time. We submitted an OER, and the legislature said, we should do this on our own. Faculty want to do this, but they don't have the time to do this. It is very, very expensive. So if there's any way you can make that happen, it doesn't have to be $20,000 to be $30,000. Thank you. I'll take your credit card. The second thing is, if we do have second event of this sort, and we focus on our faculty, I'm a huge fan of work in Georgia, where they recognize faculty who are doing this work. And I think it's really powerful how we stand there and we talk about how much money they save their students and the kids have in their lives. And I think that would be great to put on a CD and get other faculty to be engaged in this work. Third, we've done a nice job of marketing with these 2 handouts. I would really like to have seen CC by here on. We'd like to be able to reuse this. Read and like. Yes.
Absolutely. That's not a problem. You can just go ahead and take your pen, CC by on there, and we're good.
And my fourth thing is, if there is a faculty event, I would really want to invite each and every president of the faculty senate to this event because they are leaders of colleges and universities. And I think that there will be a strong voice that can take back this message to them.
Okay, so good points on all of those. The financial incentives for faculty, that's a challenge because, the real question, certainly you want to do that, but then the question is where do you find the funding? And I can assure you, if I did hand you my wallet, I don't think we get very far based on that. And you mentioned Affordable Learning Georgia. So one of the things that we were able to do with Affordable Learning Georgia, the Georgia Board of Regents, and I say us because at that point in time I was working in Georgia and I was chairing the Galileo Steering Committee. The Board of Regents gave Galileo about $1.5 million to kick off that initiative. And we were able to then in turn use that funding in part to support the grants, and that grant program is still ongoing, support the grants to faculty to develop new OER. So I think there's an important, actually this is a sideline, but it's important, there's an important division between funding faculty who want to develop new OER and somehow funding faculty who want to adopt existing OER, because it seems to me that those are two very different things and ask for very different work from the faculty. So certainly think about that. But the grants with Affordable Learning Georgia range from about $5,000 for an individual faculty member who wants to develop a new OER for a specific class, up to over $30,000 for a team of faculty who are developing an OER for a class that's taught across the entire system. And you hold out a $30,000 grant in front of faculty, and they're going to go for that. That's a good number, and as you mentioned, it looks great on a Vita. How could we do that in Florida? Well, I didn't know this at the time, but in Georgia, we kind of had an ace in the hole with Affordable Learning Georgia because the then Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs was Houston Davis, and he was very involved with the program in California that Jerry talked about. So when Houston then came to Georgia, he was right next door to the Chancellor of the Board of Regents, and really, I give him most of the credit for pushing that through, and that's really how that happened. So, Nancy, I don't know how we make that same sort of entree into our two systems, the SUS and FCS, but that's one way to approach that. And let me look. We'll take care of the CC Bio on the handouts. That's an awesome idea. In fact, I would almost suggest, he'll punch me for saying this, we probably need to think about anything and everything that we publish from FLVC should have that on there. And then I think I agree with you that having a speaker from Affordable Learning Georgia would probably be Jeff Gallant, who's the program manager, would be fantastic because he can really talk about the impact, both financial, and that's so important, but I don't want us to lose sight of student success because that's the real purpose of all this, is to improve student success. We do that through approaching the financial challenges, but at the end of the day, we're trying to have a direct and measurable impact on student success. So being able to say things like, a class that adopted this textbook changed the failure rate from 61% to 30%, really to me is more important and more impactful than saying, well, the other textbook cost $405. And Jeff can speak to that as well.
And I really like your suggestion about engaging the faculty senate in the discussions. There is an organization of the Advisory Council of Faculty Senates in our system. The president of each faculty senate serves on this advisory council, and then the chair of that advisory council serves on the board of governors. And this group meets, I think they meet quarterly. And they have asked us to come a couple of times and brief them on the strategic plan for online education. And Cindy and I actually briefed them just 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we had quite a discussion. At that time, most of their questions seemed to center on the designation of quality courses, and they had some ideas and suggestions. It was a very positive conversation. They want us to come back in March. And so maybe we should focus on OER in that discussion because that would get it on their radar screens. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Thank you. I'll talk to Cindy about
So a quick suggestion, something to put in your to-do list, and then I have a question for you. As we discussed before, there's some things that really need to be done at a policy level, or sometimes at a legislative level. So I would encourage you to think about what's needed. And you certainly don't want or need policies if they're not needed. And we never or rarely want new legislation if it's not needed. So I would think really hard about what barriers exist, and they could be financial barriers. You might want the legislature to put up some money. They might be barriers like your universities and colleges are saying, no, we will not mark OER in the course catalogs, and the students we know want that, and we know that OER moves rapidly when the course catalogs do give students that information. That might be a barrier. Other states have taken that to the legislature. The legislature says you will mark OER in course catalogs. There may be other challenges. It's also helpful sometimes either at institution, system, or legislative policy just to make statements of principle. So several state legislatures, for example, have said, we believe that textbook affordability and college affordability is a good thing, and they'll put out a statement to that. It's not a bill, it's not a law, but it's a statement of support that gives permission for action. So I would encourage you to think through what you're hearing from people in terms of barriers, and then ask yourself, where do you need either policy or some legislation to get past those so that these good folks can do the work that they want to do. And what you'll hear mostly from faculty and librarians is they often need time and money, and sometimes money means a new staff member. So what's quite common is we're seeing OER librarians pop up, for example. So we're seeing a lot of states like New York just put down $8 million from the governor's office to support SUNY and CUNY to go full in on education. And they're using those funds for OER librarians, they're using them for grants to faculty to adopt OER, to build OER. So that's the first thing to think through. The second one is really a question I would challenge you to think big. This is a good conversation we're having, but mostly we're having a conversation here about things we're already doing in Florida that could be tweaked and modified, and we could share this under CC BY, or yeah, we could do that under this existing plan. We should be thinking bigger than that. As we said before, we live in this world of abundance now. We don't live in a world of scarcity. We live in this really weird world now where we could make an educational resource or a degree program at one Florida institution, and all Florida institutions can use it at no additional cost of making copies for the rest of them. And so what's Florida's big, hairy, audacious goal? What do you want to do together? And maybe with other states as well. Do you want to stand up and issue a challenge that you want to have 5 new degree programs that are fully OER? Do you want to say the 100 highest enrolled courses in Florida will have 0 textbook costs and be 100% OER, and the way that you're going to build that is through your new membership in the Open Textbook Network, and you're going to join forces with other universities around the country that are going to build new OER, take back that means of production, own it, and share it under a CC BY license. There's lots of pathways to get there. But if you really want to excite people and you want to spur people to action, you have to name the problem and then come up with a bold, big solution, and then provide some support for people to get there. And you'll be shocked that not only will people rise to the occasion and they'll accomplish that big goal that you've laid out, but then all of the other ancillary, fabulous projects will emerge around that project. You'll see lots of other OER adoptions, lots of other productions. So I would encourage you to think outside the box, think big, and then kind of follow the steps that we've talked about. All the speakers have talked about this. Use other people's OER first, then revise and remix others' OER, and then build. And whatever you build, make sure you own it, and then share it under, hopefully, a CC BY license. So think big.
So one thing that I am hearing in the agreement, if I understood correctly, also from the speakers, is that there isn't statewide funding right now specifically for OER, and that's feeling like an obstacle. And that's really resonating with me because, as I mentioned yesterday, I'm in this strange gray area where I'm staying busy funding yet, and made fun. And let me tell you, there's a lot that you can do without your grant funding and your conference funding. It's hard to feel like we just have to pay faculty, and I totally agree that is the most direct way to get to the student savings. But as I mentioned, you really need to do a lot of gathering your stakeholders and a lot of coalition building. So that is one way that you can be laying the groundwork when you can start thinking, once you have like a very specific goal in mind for where you're going to go in Florida, what can we do before we have that money so that we can pivot our money when we do have it? Because oftentimes state money has a really specific pointer because that's the case of Oregon. So once the clock starts ticking, you don't want to be like, oh yeah, how are we going to get more copies for the students that don't have internet access or whatever it is, right? Like, this is the time to really get your ducks in a row and do all that environmental scanning, all that research about what's already happening, what's the baseline data, what are the needs. That will give you the ability to make a very compelling case that here's exactly what we're going to use this money for, here are the goals for it, here's how we're totally ready to spend this money when we do have it. So you can make a better ask for the money when you do that.
Okay, I think that's right now. So one is directly on what I would like to see next time. All of the speakers were fascinating and had great things to say. But even with the breaks, it's a little hard to integrate. I would like to see some breakout sessions or workshop opportunities where we get together in small groups and kind of talk about what's working, what isn't working, and maybe even report back in some small way. Maybe not quite an unconference model, but something like that. The other thing is, in my copious spare time, I am an adjunct instructor for development of writing, and what I'm hoping is that as we get to the point where we're sharing resources by course number designation, there's a way to share supplemental materials as well. If I go OER and I'm going to be creating test banks and worksheets and assignment descriptions and everything else that you need to have in out of the box course. And I'm going to make them whether or not anybody else wants them. But if there's one way that I can share them with other people, I would want to do that.
I'm here with a team from South Carolina, and I'm really excited to hear everything that Flo is doing. My question is, are there any conversations around the possibilities for the future of a Southeastern Regional Consortium or something that bridges across state lines a little bit? And I'm hearing great things about Georgia also. So what's the potential for that?
So from the library side, and I think John can speak to this better than I can generally, but from the library side, I have conversations with colleagues in Georgia. I'm going to an OER meeting in Alabama a week after next. And I've also got a meeting set up with my colleague Terry Galloway from Lewis in Louisiana during the ALA midwinter meeting later this week. We're all talking about that, and we're trying to figure out how to do it, because it's one of those things, on the one hand, it makes perfect sense. If we are able to use what we're doing at scale to leverage doing it better, we should do that. But then there are some barriers of, state funding and those kinds of things. So it's an idea that we all like, and we're working on it from the library side. Just haven't quite figured out how to do it yet, but I think we'll get there. It just makes sense. And I don't know, John, if you want to, that's the library picture of it. If you want to talk about that more broadly.
I attend every year, a couple times a year, meetings of the Southern Regional Education Board. And one is sitting down there from SREB, and we meet, and I meet with people from other states. And over the course of our involvement in this area with the development of the Orange Grove, over time, we've never been able to match up just right. I've had colleagues in Kentucky say, we have money, we're gonna do these 2 books. We'll give them to anybody in the U. If you'll do 2, we'll do 2. Or there's always those conversations out there, but it seems like when Al had money, we didn't have any money. Or when Georgia had money, nobody else had money. So it was sort of like everybody wanted to do it. You just couldn't make it match up just right. And now, I don't know if those conversations about you write a book, rewrite a book, make sense because there's books out there. It's almost like if there was a gap, if we did a gap analysis and said, nobody's got this, okay, well, let's work on that. Then that might make sense to have that conversation. But those conversations have happened. It's just we just haven't been able to match it up at the right moment. Everybody's talked about it. SREB's had workshops on this, and the states are all talking about it. We had cable come and talk about it, and that generated a lot of interest. And I think it just feels like we're almost over that tipping point, but not just about there. And there's a lot of good activity going, which is one of the reasons why we had this event. Is all of you are trying or doing or interested or talking about this. We're going to try to see if we can help move it forward. So, just not quite there. But I think I want to go back to Cable's point of the big thing. What's the big thing? One of the things Cable's talked about at other meetings is some states, and we've heard from other states who have formed a council. And maybe there needs to be a task group of faculty and academic leadership to talk about this issue in Florida, to be the point to have that conversation in the academic front. Doing the Gen Ed core in Florida shouldn't be hard. We're all on Common Course number, which makes it a lot easier. So we don't have to have that conversation about which English are we going to do. It's all the same. So that conversation is off the table, really. It's really about, let's just pick one. And there's probably, we sat down and inventoried everybody and said, here's 36 courses or sequences of general education. Who's got one? We might already have it already. And if people are willing to share all of that, we might already be there. I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm willing to bet that we're really close. Because I know there are several colleges I know that are working really hard to get the AA totally built out as OER. So I bet we're close.
Well, one thing we talked about yesterday in terms of how the SREB states could collaborate, there's an example of that we did in the Northwest. It was a very simple agreement. So several years ago, about 5 years ago, Oregon was getting into OER big, Washington was, so was British Columbia and California. And they were some of the early players, and we were all building OER. My state was building a general education curriculum for community colleges. California, the governor gave $5 million. They wanted to build 50 open textbooks. British Columbia had money to build 20 open textbooks. And we said, whoa, wait a minute. Let's all agree to do two things. First of all, we'll meet face-to-face once a year. We'll all take turns hosting the meeting, but we'll all get together and make sure there's at least one rep from every one of these states and Canadian provinces that will get together every year. And the main purpose of that meeting is just to tell each other what we're going to do next year. So California, you're going to build those 50 open textbooks? Well, now I know I'm not going to build those 50. You know those, I'll do something else. So that was agreement number one, is that we won't duplicate each other's work. And why not? Because number two, we all agree to put a CC BY license on everything we build. So we're not going to use other licenses, we all agree to that license. And that way, all the states and provinces can take it and modify it any way they want to, remix it with anything else in the conference. So very simple. Meet every year, and agree to openly license it, and then in the interim, communicate with each other on listservs and whatever means you want to use to make sure everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Nice, simple. I'm not giving money to your state. I'm building for my state. But whatever I build, I'll share with you. So that might be a nice, easy way to start in SREB. But then remember, OER is global, right? It knows no boundaries. So I wouldn't limit yourself to a conversation at SREB. Through the Open Textbook Network, you're going to be in a U.S. conversation immediately and beyond. Join Creative Commons conversation. Now you're in a global conversation. You're in, people will be able to use your stuff globally, and you'll be able to take globally, or at least you'll know about it, right? You can always take OER because it's got the open license on it. And so, join up with Debbie in the Northeast, join up with WCET in the West, join up with MEC in the Midwest, right? There's all these regional consortia in the United States who are all having this conversation. Yes, start with SRAB because you're going to want to have some face-to-face meetings, but broadcast beyond that, right? Go to each other's conferences, share what you're doing, and when you really start to hum, Florida says, look, our goal is to knock off our 100 highest level courses, or these 3 AA degrees, or whatever they might be, and you share that, and then you tell other states what we'd really love to have that we don't have, the gap analysis, is X. Anybody interested in building that? And if we're smart as an education community, the academy is wise, we will divide and conquer what we need. Right? We'll build what we need, we'll own it, and we'll share it with each other. So this is not rocket science. It's just not the way we do things today. So we've got to shift our thinking to we're going to build what we need, share it with everybody, and we're going to work with each other to knock down the barriers and knock down the content gaps.
Hi, Kevin Silver, Florida State University. So first of all, thank you so much for putting on this event. I think all of the speakers have been brilliant, and I really enjoyed this last session in particular. I think we've served a ton of great ideas. So just two more sort of quick ones that aren't really well, but just sort of building on what other people have said. I think some support to sort of expand expand out the affordability council management program is something variant of it that they started at for the International University. I understand it. I think that they're currently offering those, replacing those badges on distance courses in particular. I know that FLBC competing to meetings with all of the distance learning directors in Florida, for the public colleges and universities. So that might be an opportunity to sort of share the word about that and then try and support other distance learning directors to adopt similar programs. And also, just following on from what you mentioned about course codes, if we could have some kind of online tool or portal similar to what they have over in Oregon, where we can report OER adoptions at our respective institutions. Faculty could go there and consult it and look up the courses that they teach quite easily and sort of see how they deploy resources that they can use to make that happen their institution as well.
I'm proud of you. We'll also got to share after events and you there. We've got an event coming up, and it might be of interest to all of you in about a month to attend live attendance.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very grateful for the State University to be having David Wiley come visit and give a keynote address. A keynote address, and in addition to that, we have a number of other speakers and some collaborative breakout sessions, some more like hands-on sessions to teach, hopefully, our faculty and others how to find OER, create OER, adapt OER, even also pedagogy, design, assignments, that kind of thing. And so we're going to be live streaming all of the presentations on YouTube. And I just wanted to say that the email to FLBC's marketing director, he said he would share it with all of you, so you'll be able to find out. But if you were to just Google FSU Open Education Symposium, I'm sure you'll find our website. So again, if you're in the Tallahassee area or sort of in a reasonable distance from that, please feel free to register to attend in person. But otherwise, we will have that live stream to accommodate the remote view. One shade.
Across the state of Florida, we have a lot of healthcare professional students, not just doctors and nurses, but physical therapists, speech therapists, occupational therapists. We have a lot of healthcare students. And I would love to find out who might have the decision point of opening up the library services and databases that the University of Florida has in medical school and all their health into some of these tremendous library resources that UF, FSU, USF, these other big state universities have. If we're part of that, why could we not access that? Or how do we access that?
Licensing. Yeah.
And Bob Dugan, Bob, are you still here? Bob has slipped out. He wisely left before. So here's what, and this is one of our lifelong struggles in libraries. So the vendors that we purchase those e-resources and databases from, purchase is the key word, and they license those to us by institution, by FTE. So there are two ways that we do that. We have a centralized pool of funding that we use to supply resources basically for all 40 institutions. And so that has to be spent on things that are applicable for all 40 institutions. So Claire, who's over behind you there, my good friend Claire, we want to make sure that her students at South Florida State College have access to all the core content that they need. So that's where we focus that funding. UF then, for what they're buying to support those medical and healthcare programs, they're buying that out of that University of Florida library budget. And it's licensed to them by the content provider, by the company, based on a contract directly with them for their FTE. So they can't give another institution's students access to that content. Yes, they can borrow it through interlibrary loan. Yes, thank you.
I do understand that, and our library does a great job putting those resources in. It takes time. And I think when I hear about consortiums and multi-stage connections, that with all of this, need a healthcare provider for whatever reason, we would love to know that person, whether they're a therapist, a nurse, a physician, that they're all practicing with an evidence-based practice background, not ancient information. And so these databases that are created by the Library of Congress on a national level, all of the institutions go up to that information to give those full text articles. It would just seem nice and a little more equal if our smaller universities could have access to that same information. And I say that because the University of West Florida opened nurse practitioner programs, which is now the new mid level. And everybody everywhere will be accessing nurse practitioner, whether it's at the local CPS or the physician's clinic. And these providers need that same level of evidence as medical students.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I hate to pick on Bob because he's not here, which makes him an easy target. But have that conversation with Bob Dugan, because he has a local budget that he can use to meet those needs. And so I'll give you an example. The institution I just left, we instituted a bachelor's degree in nursing about 4 years ago, BSN. And part of that conversation was, okay, how much money needs to go to the library and what resources do you need to add to support that program? So that had to happen. That had to happen at that local level. Now, what you can do is you can look at the other institutions across the state that have similar programs, ask them what e-resources that they're purchasing, and then we can go and negotiate with those vendors on your behalf. And we can probably get you the best possible deal, but the funding would still have to come, it'd have to come out of Bob's pocket, not mine.
Hi, this is Janice Henderson. I'm the library director at Northwest Florida State College, and you are in my hometown. Welcome. I just want to say thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much to all of you for coming and spending some of your hard-earned dollars in our little piece of Florida's economy. We're very happy to have you, and very happy to have this particular event. All I can say, but I think we have a door prize that's coming next.
I can do a door prize. So I have a door prize from Canvas. It's Mr. Will Woods Folder, or Folded, from York Technical College.
Hey.